Hi there. Today I'd like to talk about a book from the large collection that Ayoob wrote. And this one is from 1978. It was published and it's called Fundamentals of Modern Police Impact Weapons. And it was published by the Charles Thomas publishers, who were um, a very prominent publisher of law enforcement training manuals and texts. The foreword to the book is by Bill Jordan, and in it he says what really the first time he saw a baton being used was in a bar where during military service, where a military police officer came in and used the baton to eject a drunken customer using a particular method which he describes. And he said he became interested in baton training when he joined law enforcement, but the only texts available were the World War II texts, which were more towards lethal force military rather than law enforcement and peace officers. So he welcomed Mass's text on the subject. So Mass, besides being very much into the police, was also a martial arts exponent. And I remember him writing in things like Black Belt and other magazines. And he very much was concerned in the use of force and making it more professional for the police. And impact weapons training is a big part of that. Okay, the contents of the book include, and very nicely, see if you can see that, autographed by Mass for me. I actually bought this in South Africa. Just saw the prices in rand, so I don't obviously bought it on a trip. Traditional weapons: the nightstick or baton, short billies, saps, combination impact weapons, the prosecutor baton, Yawara, riot baton, sap gloves, the nunchaku, and then he goes into different schools of training or systems. So one of the things is the use of saps or blackjacks. Now, at one time, these were imported into the UK, and our local gun shop had all the Buchheimer saps, the flat sap, and so on. And Terry O'Neill and I borrowed them, and we field tested them at work, and we weren't impressed with any of them. In my opinion, all of those things really are, from our point of view, you might as well use unarmed strikes. Um, they didn't really do much, and I'm still of that opinion. Going on to other things, one of the things was weighted gloves or sap gloves, and these became an issue a few years ago, several years ago, in the door community, when a type of glove was marketed for security personnel or doormen. It's these, and they were called Blade Runner, and they've got lead in them somewhere, and it was actually a no-no because they are classed as an offensive weapon, and we advise no one to wear them. These are the Northern Ireland gloves, which are not an offensive weapon. It's just that they've got padding over the knuckle area, and the reason for that was if you were using a baton, then the vulnerable area of your knuckles was protected in a clash. So the police actually didn't like the Blade Runner gloves for legal reasons. They don't like the Northern Ireland gloves either. But at one time, I remember them going round in Liverpool, and they were objecting to doormen wearing gloves at all, any kind of gloves. And it was winter, and a lot of the lads were wearing gloves standing outside the clubs. And it was a rather silly thing for the police to do. Another area that Mass talks about is the flashlight, the use of the flashlight, which at the time of writing had become very popular. The modern flashlight, pioneered by Streamlight and Maglite, um, and it was starting to become carried by patrol officers. And he shows how to use it in different techniques and so on in the book. And in my opinion, the 4-cell Maglite was the best compact impact weapon you could have. It was a very good impact weapon, and it was a pretty decent flashlight as well. So there's that. Then he goes into what was still at the time called the prosecutor baton, or the PR-24 baton. Now, this, to all intents and purposes, is an elongated tonfar, the Okinawan tonfar weapon from Ryukyu Kobudo. So the inventor of it, Lon Anderson, had actually served in the U.S. military in Okinawa. So the inference was that he saw tonfar and he sort of turned it into a police weapon. Now, I actually met him at Hazlitt conference. This is the Hazlitt shirt, and asked him, and he denied it. He said he came upon the design quite independently. So, what to believe? At one time, the PR-24 was really the fashionable police impact weapon, and in the UK, the police were still armed with the truncheon, the 14-inch truncheon, and there was a big move to upgrade the police equipment. And I was writing in Fighting Notes at the time, and I wrote quite a few columns about this, in my opinion, what they should do. And I was asked by the one of the shooting organizations, actually, to host a training course with Mass Ayoob in Liverpool to train people in the PR-24. And it was advertised, and I got a lot of replies, including a lot from guys who are big names in police training in the UK. And I remember a couple of guys from the military, I think the RAF police and things like this. There was a real interest in it. So we had it all booked. And then the Home Office got wind of it, and they contacted Monadnock in the United States and said, if this course goes ahead, if we ever do adopt the side handle baton, we won't use Monadnock products. Don't allow this guy to teach. Because Mass was certified at the very, very highest level by Monadnock. So he wrote to me and he said, look, down, I can't do the course, you know. So we still brought him over, and we did a course on other use of force, and it went down very well. But that was the Home Office. They didn't want people, even police instructors, learning the techniques of the PR-24. So that when things changed, what happened? The Home Secretary changed, and the new Home Secretary just said, "Yeah, you know, we're going to look at different police weapons." And I still remember the first time I saw police carrying PR-24s, expandable PR-24s, and ASP expandable batons, and there was no reaction from the public because the Home Office had thought that little old ladies would faint at the sight of the police armed with anything other than the truncheon that they carried out of sight. didn't happen. So the other thing I mentioned there is the ASP, expandable baton, and I was on the first ever ASP instructor course in the UK. I got certified, um, and then I remember seeing I was up in Southport, and a police officer, a big hefty police officer, was confronting a local rat, and the guy was being aggressive. And the police officer drew his asp, snapped it open, and hit the guy with three perfect leg strikes. One, two, three. And the guy looked at him and went, "And what?" And the officer turned to me and said, "I need a bigger stick." Um, his technique was good, targeting, etc. It's just that a lot of stuff doesn't work. Uh, Particularly, I'm not a fan of the expandable baton. It's a light aluminium tube, hasn't got a lot of mass, and in my opinion, as taught on the muscle mass areas like the thigh, it's not very effective, particularly when people are on drugs. So I remember going to ASLET and other training conferences, and people would introduce new baton designs. I remember one was the shepherd's crook, and there was all sorts, and they never caught on. They were too complicated, and to an extent, that's the problem with the side handle baton. And I'm an instructor with it, and it's great because it's got a big syllabus and there's a lot to teach, and it gives you a feeling of training, but translating that into the street can be a problem. So I think those kind of designs have fallen out of favor. One of the other items in the book, and that this is really now very shocking to most people, is the use of the baton for chokeholds. Now, in the modern era, the past couple of years, police use of force is under a microscope, and uh, the use of the baton in a chokehold would be a no-no. I think an officer who did that would be pilloried. He'd be probably charged. So that's gone, and it's basically lethal force. So the book has a lot of stuff, and it's very interesting to read from the current perspective. You know, that was then, this is now. Excuse me. Um, to sum up the book, uh, man is a tool-bearing animal, and we picked up a rock to use as a weapon, and probably the next thing we picked up would be a stick, some sort of branch or something like that. So we've been using sticks ever since we first started walking upright, and we're very good with them. It's the most basic, fundamental weapon. So a baton is something that we're familiar with. In my opinion, the best is just an ordinary straight baton, 24, 26-inch straight baton. We know how to use it. If you are going to carry an impact weapon as a police officer, as a uniformed officer, with all the other stuff you've got to carry, then a straight baton is probably the best choice. It gives you the extension, the distance that you can use. It's also got applications in public order. Uh, Obviously, and the book doesn't cover this, taser has become very, very popular. And obviously, it has a big application in use of force. However, we've always got to remember, and this was something I asked Shane Goza on one of the courses to discuss from his perspective as a police officer, and he just summed up with everything fails. Tasers fail, batons fail, sprays fail, and bullets fail. At the end of the day, you've always got to have somewhere else to go. Always be prepared for failure. even with the most fearsome and heavy impact weapon, wielded by a strong, committed, aggressive person, it can fail. So the book uh, is a great look back on how police use of force has changed. Mass is an authority on all this subject. I'm sure in articles since he's brought everything up to date. I don't think that he hasn't updated the book. I know that for a fact. It would be interesting to see an update of it. But uh, he goes into the LAM method of use, the LAPD baton method, which I still think is probably the best framework to hang this stuff on. Terrific book, and it should be in the library of every um, police instructor.